I'm here to talk to you about this app that I'm showing you Midsummer Night's Dream. The first one I worked on was actually The Tempest. This was an innovation, it's a sort of a collaboration between Elliot Visconsi at Notre Dame and Catherine Rev, at the time was at Bryn Mawr, supported by some outside financial backers, to basically exploit the affordances of an iPad to bring a student-oriented, like a middle school to high school level, canonical text to an educational audience, right? And the ambition was very high in the initial iteration of it, and we had lots of ideas about cinematic clips of Shakespeare and all kinds of things that were not feasible due to ownership and licensing and just sheer unaffordability of it. But I think what we've got at the end of the day is quite interesting. So I'll just bracket this by saying, in my research life, I'm working on a critical history of vicariousness. I just left, in fact, writing an article on the Renaissance deja vu of the internet as a Camillan, as a vision of a particularly weird mystic from the Italian 16th century called Giulio Camillo. So I do engage digital phenomena from a critical point of view, usually from a kind of 20,000 foot kind of theoretical perspective. But what I'm going to be showing you today is a very different kind of on-the-ground approach, which I really enjoy doing. So this is, I'm just going to hide this for a moment, this is the text of Midsummer Night's Dream. My job as critical editor was to bring on board all of the editorial folk who, in these little icons you see with screens behind them, you can see where those are to indicate that there's critical feedback offered. And when you click on, you find, or when you touch on the icon, you have a list of the critics who've responded. So you can see at the very top of the play, a bunch of us all jumped in there. 12 of us are actually offering critical insights on the play. This seems like a fairly, I don't know, banal text to digital analogy, right? But I would say the thing that's really kind of astonishing about the digital version is that instead of offering the kind of critical commentary that you would find in an Arden edition, right? So you have a single editor who's basically intervening in a history of debates around, say, a crux or performance histories around a given line or a given passage. What you have are a bunch of different scholars who all come in from a bunch of different points of view and say, here's what I would attack in this part of the play, right? So right from the get-go, we all have opinions. You can see, if I pull up my commentary here, this is me talking about the dramatis personae who actually come before the beginning of the scene, but you can also see that there are plenty of other approaches, even as you head further down in the scene. Mowat and Morstein, who are the editors of the printed version of this play, for instance, have things to say about textual production. And so what I like about this from the get-go is that it gives you kind of multiplicity of voices and many kinds of perspectives, none of which is righter than the other. There are places, in fact, where scholars outright conflict with each other in their interpretations, and I find that incredibly freeing. And this is what teachers report back to, right? Is it sort of enfranchises students to say, well, I don't have to agree with all takes because that's obviously impossible. It's free. I'm obviously free to sort of take my own path. There's also a glossary, which you find in the asterisk, so any words or passages that might be lines that might be difficult to interpret are offered a kind of paraphrase. There's also an ability to annotate the text. So you can do this in many ways, including by offering, you can highlight the text. If I hide this. You can highlight a piece of the text like this. And say you want to find out in Midsummer Night's Dream how often the word dream, for instance, is offered or spoken. You can quickly find out. Every version of it is immediately accessible. And so this offers a really useful kind of instantaneous concordance approach. And it's really helpful even from the get-go when you ask students to sort of pick in the first scene what seem like themes, right? Something they can immediately grasp. Then they can immediately verify it in a way that's interestingly quantifiable, and it gets them thinking about what that quantification means, right? And they suddenly become quite sharp about distinguishing between words that don't have a lot of content value and words that are actually quite specific to the meaningfulness and the particular stylistic shape of a play. But now I'll try to show you some of the things that I think are super fun. So inside the text, Oh, and the other thing I was going to show you inside the annotation is you can turn on the audio at any point. I didn't ask for a hookup with speakers, but you may be able to hear this anyway. He's whispering.
Patched fool if he will offer to say what you thought I had.
Or even little kind of tinkly sound effects. So there's a performed text that runs through the entirety of the work, and you can actually, in the extras, find that there are, under Audio Plus, there are a couple places where there are alternative takes to give students an understanding that the performance that they hear is not the definitive performance, right? That actors can take more than one approach. In this same column of resources, there are a lot of introductory sort of spiels, right? These are what you'd find in the prefatory part of a written edition. But what's nice about them is the iPad affords these really high resolution images, and because this project is in a collaboration with the Folger Shakespeare Library, the images are particularly nice resources. So, for instance, right, you can see a Latin grammar here reproduced. You can see we have, in fact, some fairly, this is Walter Hodge's version of the Globe, right? So this, when you look at it in your Arden edition, it's like this big, and it's really lousy to try to get students to sort of envision performance from. On the iPad, it's really lovely. And one of the things I really enjoy doing is using these images to try to get students to think about the pictorial culture, the visual culture in which the text is embedded, and that usually is very distant for understandable reasons for students reading the play. This text that I co-wrote with Peter Holland pulls specifically from illustrations of Midsummer, and I have to say, here's a good image. They're really wonderful, and they are extremely hard. I mean, normally virtually inaccessible. Folger has just started digitizing and making publicly available for educational use all of its images, but there are millions of them in the archive. Are we at 5? All right, so so this gives you some sense of what the app does, and I'm happy to answer questions about other things.